So this week, this is the second episode of DBC Hangouts. I think that's what I called it. I should know this. But with me this week is Mitchell, which Mitchell is from the Austin Campus. And y'all haven't met him yet, so I'll let Mitchell do a brief introduction of himself for all of you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So I've been in Austin for about 4 years now, and most of my kind of jobs, at least work background, has been a lot of technical support or general customer service in the retail setting. The ranging from like working at Apple as a technical specialist to just kind of being like a document holder / handler for like kind of in Google, just a business branch. Long story short, I was really seeing that a lot of my opportunities for growth in this kind of position were mainly soft skill based. I wasn't really developing any hard skills, and I saw a lot of success through programming and programmers in general, and understanding that I was in the computer industry for a while. I figured making a switch to web development and understanding a new science would be a really great career move for me.
So were you always interested in tech growing up?
100%. I guess the right word here is I was the family computer expert. If a family member broke something, I was usually the one digging deep into Windows to fix it. But I've always just been working with technology as a kid, and I think it was only natural to kind of lean towards this profession.
Yeah, and actually, I just thought about this. I'm really interested in this because right before we started recording this, Mitchell told me he's 23, and I told him to go F himself. I'm 30, and he's already starting this really great program. So you're really into computers growing up, but where were computers at, like, when you phrased it like growing up? Because for me personally, I had a black and white Macintosh computer at my house when I was like 6 or 7.
Sure.
And the internet is a big deal. My family got the internet before a lot of people, and that was like when I was in like middle school and high school. Like that was when, man, I'm dating myself. That's when AOL Instant Messenger came in. Okay. And when I graduated high school, that's when Facebook had started, but it was only college campuses, and it wasn't all of them yet. So that was like first generation for a lot of this, what everyone takes for granted now. But I'm really curious now. Like, so like, what was the technology around you? So when you were a kid?
General exposure to me as a kid was mainly through video games and computers. Because AOL, I'd say I just missed that kind of like instant messenger 24/7 gap. By that point, I was like 13, 14, and my biggest memory, at least, like being on the computer and dealing with computer-based problems, just starts with like playing RuneScape with my friends in elementary school. Like 100%.
Right on.
Oh. Like if you're just like you're using basic internet and it's working, but when you're on your computer, you tend to like dig deeper on it just by default, whether it be like going on some weird website and downloading custom cursor icons on it, or like if something isn't working properly on your machine, you have to fix it. And that's just kind of like growing up. It's been from like an old Compaq laptop. Like, do we even remember Compaq? You know, all the way to just like a terrifying home PC that was just like no maintenance was done on it ever, and it was just. I'm pretty sure this tower was like 7 years old, and I remember my mother just like putting new graphics cards in it because I wanted to play better video games on it, like little by little by little.
Yeah, I was opposite you. I was so bad with technology, at least for my generation. I was always having to ask friends like to help me out with computer stuff so I could run like new games. So like when I was in high school, I didn't really get into Warcraft 3. Like I had some buddies that play that, but like Diablo 2 and StarCraft 2 were still going.
Yep.
Like Brood War were still going really strong when I was in high school, and that was you didn't have to pay for subscriptions or anything. It's just play online all the time on BattleNet.
And that makes a lot of sense too. Just like when you're on a computer, you're working with a computer and you're used to the environment. But I would definitely say like professionally, because it wasn't in a sense of like my tech hobbies at 16. I wasn't really like ripping computers open and like hardware. Because on the flip side, my education was mainly creative. I went to a performing arts school. I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, and I went to a performing arts school.
I got so many friends from there, man.
Really?
Like musicians, yeah. I was
SCPA, dude. Never forget.
That's funny. I remember I was on the Glenn Miller gig, and like my first summer with the band, the whole rhythm section wound up like quitting or getting fired. And we got all rhythm section cats from Ohio, and we were calling them the Ohio Players.
I love it.
Just like the funk band, just because they're all from like the same city. They're like, or one of them was from Akron, and I think one of them was from Cincinnati, but they'd all like wound up in the same spot in Ohio.
That's great.
Through the jazz program.
But yeah, that was always like the primary talent was always just like music. I've been a singer for like 13 years of my life, so it's definitely been a constant. And then technology just kind of was supplementing it, usually through play, just lots of either through gaming or just kind of exploring ways to make my computer faster, made me stumble upon these things. And as I got older, and I just found myself using computers more and more to like do what I want, and finding custom interfaces and just quality of life things. You learn. And then I'm 23 and I'm like, cool, I'm grinding it out in retail, but I already found myself like getting bored of it or not really being satisfied with the kind of climb that's associated with retail. And I just realized that I really wanted to learn some hard skills to supplement my creative soft skills. That sounds a little horn tooty, but it just seems correct.
No, one thing I really like about tech is that I feel like the ceiling is really high. Compared to many other industries. Like, I mean, even with music, honestly, like, and that was like, I want to work on my own projects, but as a sideman, I was looking at that situation. I was like, okay, unless I like really focus on doing one kind of gig, like if I was like spent the next 5-10 years being like, I want to do Broadway. Yes, I could double my salary, but
your grind is very specific. It's a very like intensive path that you would take for that.
Yeah, and I went to see a Broadway show for the first time a few weeks ago, and it was the best. I went with a friend, but honestly, like, I just don't think that's the career I want. Like, my background's in jazz, so it's awesome. Hard to make a lot of money.
And that's what I was just about to say. I was like, you know what, dude? Like, we're making bread. Like, I want to eat. I love steak so much.
I'll be honest. Like,
that on musicians.
I'm lucky. Like, I've mostly made my living off performing, and I've gotten to like a decent salary, but a lot of the reasons for me switching had to do more with me wanting to. I want to start my own business, so that's like a good reason to go into coding. I wanted to start a business that did not have a storefront.
That's really cool.
Software seemed like a good direction for that, and I had wound up doing a lot of like business freelance work and projects and some business consulting while I was living in Knoxville, and I really enjoyed it, which I did not. It was just something where I was like, oh, I have a knack for a lot of these things, but it's like, how do I keep this freelance lifestyle but make more money doing it?
Exactly.
And I still have time to work on the music projects, but it's nice doing different things, like rather than just doing one thing your whole life. At least for me. Like, some people, they can just do one thing and that's the best for them, but
nope.
I like having seasons, like a season where I'm really working on music and then a season I'm really working on business. And I really am enjoying coding. I'm not saying I'm not in this for just the entrepreneurship.
Sure. I agree with you though. It's when you broaden your skill set too, because I've been doing something for such a long time. Well, at least job wise, it's been like, I'm talking my first job for a real job after at like 2019, 20 was like Best Buy retail, selling PCHO baby. So like, but like education has always been so musical and creative and performance based, while my work has always been very technical and like support.
Man, that's so crazy though. I didn't know we had that in common. Like, somehow just for the viewers know, me and Mitchell met. I think we did our guided pairing together.
We did an online
pairing. Guided pairing was like, Mitchell was my first partner. And I remember thinking, I was like, oh my God, this dude has the soul of a programmer.
Oh, jeez.
No, because like, you reminded me, I have some friends growing up. One in particular I'm thinking of, named Merle Zimmerman, who's a genius. Like, there's no other way to put it. And like he wound up, like I think he got his PhD in general chemistry in Maryland because, as he phrased it, no one does general chemistry, and like super popular TA. Like, but he's just like mirthful, and his approach to science is he never really asks, "Should I do this?" He just asks, "How do I do this?" And there's like this like mischievous childlike joy to everything he builds. Where like he described at some point like building a, I think it's called a maser or something. It's like a laser, but it's a microwave laser.
Oh,
And he described how to build and design one, and he's like, "Yeah, it's great because you could like, you could make a bag of popcorn from 30 feet away." And I was like, that sounds like a weapon. He's like, "Well, yeah, you could do that too."
It depends on your mindset when you're holding it, you know?
So that's like, I mean, that's like the joy with which he builds everything.
I love that though. That 100% like speaks programming. It's almost relatable to like construction or like bridge building. That's really far, but we really get to take pride and ownership in what we make. But at the same time, what we make is relevant for years to come. So this is kind of me stealing quotes from project-oriented design in Ruby, Pooter, which is just a really great book that I've been reading on, and we'll talk about it later. But it's just a very great philosophy on design for object-oriented programming languages. And
awesome.
Yeah, programming is just like that. It's very artistic, and I think that really like tickles our brains, yours and mine, very well. I think we like that aspect a lot. And at the same time, it's also practical. It's very specific in what works and what doesn't work. So it's challenging, and I think that's exactly what a musician wants.
Yeah, and I like that it's also everything you build in the stealing from financial or everything you build is an asset in programming, because once you build it, it's there, and like there's no physical product, so there's no cost to it. It's just like when you distribute it, that's just profit every time you do, and it can happen for years, depending on how well what you build is and how it adapts to new technology. But
it's timeless.
The fact that it's timeless is very appealing to me. The fact you can solve real life problems that people are having is also appeals to me very much.
Yeah.
But we should probably start talking about what's been going on in phase 0. So just so the listeners know, at this point we have done the last part of phase 0, weeks 7 through 9. And I guess we'll start. I was going to say we should start with JavaScript in week 7, but just so I remember to say this disclaimer, I think we should start out talking about, we're going to talk about the assessment, but we're not going to talk about anything on the assessment or anything specifically that we studied for the assessment. Like DBC takes this very seriously, and you should too. Like don't try to find out what's on it in advance just because they have it there for a reason, and the reason it's there is to make sure you're prepared to be on campus when you get there. And you're just cheating yourself if you somehow magically found out what was there, or like, I don't know how someone would even do that, like, or copy pasted, but like that you're doing a disservice to yourself by doing that. This is, and that's what I like about DBC. There's no grades. The emphasis is on you learning the material because you're not getting a degree. This going to school here is not going to get you a job. It's all about what you do while you're there. It's like, hey, it's like you're being a performance major, you know, like in the arts. It's great.
Completely agree.
You just got to be really freaking good when you get out.
You will only get what you put in with the program. Like if you're watching if you're watching this to try to like understand if it's like a golden ticket to jump into the middle class, then it's not that simple. Like you need to put in the effort and you need to work like hell in order to just like accumulate these skills. I think point blank what people need to understand when they like are interested in these types of programs is you are going to come out of it barely a junior developer. And I mean barely. I think like one in reviews and just like understanding your strengths and weaknesses, you need to learn to own up to the fact of like this industry is so much like, okay, I don't know this problem. Here's my solution to it. Let's work from there. and that's what you're going to be like for at least I'm confident in saying, like, I'm going to graduate this, and we haven't gone through phase 1 yet, but I'm very confident in knowing that I'm going to be sitting in an interview with an employer and I'm going to be like, I haven't seen this in my life. You're telling me to like put this on a whiteboard, and I'm just gonna draw.
Well, that's actually really good advice. Like I've heard multiple people that interviewers, I guess, like make that comment. They're like, if you don't know this or you've never been introduced, say that,
please. Yeah.
Like it doesn't mean you won't get a job, but like don't. If you try the bullshit, they're going to know. Like
you need to embrace the fact that like you are. Like junior developers can take upwards of like a whole year to even achieve that scale. And the fact that like we're being pumped out as marketed as junior developers within 18 weeks is, yes, it's an incredible achievement and we've done great work. And I can't wait for it to be so, but you need to understand what you do and you don't know. And you need to be upfront about that. I think that's the biggest, just what success is going to be for us post-graduation. Is to be very honest in that interview type.
Yeah. So,
but phase 0.
And later on, we're at the end of this, the second half, we're going to just be talking about how should you prep for phase 0 and resources outside of DBC to bridge that gap. Like,
sorry for jumping the gun.
Like we're not just doing the curriculum. We're like trying to do everything we freaking can. But okay, so now that we've said we're not going to talk about what's on the assessment. We are going to talk about how we studied for the assessment, which I can start or you can start.
You can go ahead and start.
Okay. So my first thought on studying for the assessment is that kind of like real life, when you get past really basic school where you don't ever have to study, which I suspect a lot of people watching this had that experience growing up, at least at some point. But there comes a point you get into a subject at a level where you start getting your ass kicked. And you realize usually you don't know how to study the first time it happens to you, and that's the whole journey. Like I totally bombed in chemistry and pre-calc because of that. Like I think I got by with either very bottom Bs or C averages. If I got Bs, it's because like I lucked out on how they averaged the quarters together. But like I think preparing for this assessment is that every week of this curriculum, if you're going through something, they say embrace confusion, and that's true. But every week of the curriculum, at the end of the week, understand everything you learned. That's the first thing I'll say. Like, don't just be like, well, I guess, maybe in the future. Like, I mean, it's true from assignment to assignment. There have been moments where I was just like, I had a much better understanding by the end of the week than I did in the middle of the week.
Yeah.
But I think if you have the time, and you get through all the challenges, don't just stop there. Be like, do I really understand all these concepts? And that's part of what's great. Take the review and reflect seriously. Like I was putting my videos up actually on this channel, like for the review and reflects, because they even said that, like, you could put it on YouTube. I was like, all right, I never thought of doing that. I'm going to put this on YouTube.
What were you mainly like reflecting on to kind of prepare yourself for the assessments? Going back to like
literally, I'm talking about the review and reflect assignments they gave us.
Just those specific ones, yeah.
But I did it orally rather than written, and I do it all in one take because I wouldn't use notes. Like every once in a while, I'll be like, hold on, let me glance and make sure I'm using these two terms right. And those are really good too because they actually tend to fill in the material they think you should know, but I don't think they have time to teach you. I think that honestly, I think that's part of why it's there. Because some terms were there, and I was like, this hasn't come up once this week. What the hell is, like, what's a node, Yeah,
we are learning an industry in 18 weeks. It goes right back to that original statement.
I think being prepared along the way is a huge step in the right direction. Other things I did was I set up, I coordinated and scheduled 2 review sessions with my classmates in Chicago. And I said, like, hey, let's meet in person. And I talked to a couple people I already knew just to make sure, like, okay, at least 2 or 3 of us will be at each session. And then I'll post it publicly for the Chicago skippers. Fiery Skippers is the name of our specific cohort.
It's a moth.
DBC. Yeah, it's a moth. Yeah, someone researched that. I like the name, though, like Fiery Skippers. It's cool.
I think it's super cool. I thought it was a frog at first, side note, but we're
and so Yeah, that would be a good name for a frog. But but yeah, so I put together 2 study sessions, and I was actually the only person that attended both. And I mean, my attitude was like overkill. Like, you can't overly study. And for me, this wasn't even studying for just the assessment. It was like, this was week 7 was our chance to really get a solid grounding and foundation, fill in any gaps or weaknesses we felt like we had in Ruby up until that point in time. And I'm really glad they make the week 7 curriculum is really easy and brief. We'll talk about it shortly. It is about JavaScript, but there was only like 3 challenges, I think. And then they're like, study for the assessment. Mm-hmm. They do give you a study sheet for the assessment, and you should use it. Like, I think that's common sense. Yeah. And that was actually how we wound up structuring our study sessions, was we just went down that sheet and we talked about the concepts on it. And we also, it was a great chance. There's a couple challenges we had previously, and I was like, man, like, I did it this way, but I feel like there's a better way to do this. Does anyone know the answer? And I think specifically it was with arrays. No, it was with hashes. So with arrays, if people have been coding a little bit, they'll know this lingo, and if you haven't, don't worry about it.
Arrays in JavaScript or Ruby? Sorry.
In Ruby. So there was a assignment prior to that where they were having us build all our own methods in Ruby. And they said, don't use any special methods. And so with arrays, I was able to do this because you have an index feature. And so I was able to build like counters and loops using the index, and then you just go through all the different values in the array. But with hashes, there isn't an index. And I was asking people, I'm like, so how the frick do like I wound up having to use the each method. And I was like, but there has to be a way, because the each method exists. It's a thing. Yeah. There has to be a way to index through hashes. Mm-hmm. And we actually did find something very similar. There's one, I think, called keys, and there's one called values.
Yeah.
And when you use those, you can actually be like keys, and then you can index
those keys.
This is from like 2 or 3 weeks ago. This might be wrong, but I think that was how we figured out how to do it. We spent like 20 minutes in the study session, and it probably didn't help with the assessment at all. But like, I think at the same time, like, really focusing on trying to understand Ruby. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I did that was really good was I started using Code Wars that week, which I'd heard about. I forget the guy's name, but he was, this story was going around in the news, and he has some really good interviews. We'll put it in the comments below if people want to watch them, where he talked about, or sorry, this guy, he got out of, I think it was like Hack Academy. Then he wound up teaching there for a few years, but then when he went searching for a job, he really struggled. It took him 3 months, but the offer he wound up getting, he went to Air BnB starting at a salary of $250,000 a year.
Jeez.
So, and like, when you listen to him talk in the interview, you're like, oh, this dude's super on top of it, super together. His background was like as a either a semi-pro or professional poker player, which appealed to me because I have some background in that too. But he talked about that. He's like, if you go on Code Wars, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Basically, Code Wars, you get challenges, you code them, and once you solve them, you can see other people's answers. And then it's kind of like Reddit, where people vote up the best solutions.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So it seems like just a free-form training camp then.
Yeah. And so like you spend like 12 lines of code solving a challenge, and then the top voted solution is in 1 line. Yeah. And so I started doing that, and he talked about doing this too. It's like, so when that happens, you look up, you won't understand half of what they wrote, so like, learn it. Mm-hmm. Like, actually research what every single block of that code and what each of those things do. There's things about the logic of Ruby I did not know prior to doing Code Wars, in terms of like how you can use true or false statements, or like if you can use a true false statement where if a variable is nil, it will do the other option. And like, I'm still learning that, but I didn't know that. Like, they didn't
dependencies and like what Ruby is okay with and isn't okay with.
Yeah, and they have not talked about that. I mean, because we're covering so much ground, I bet they'll talk about it once we hit campus.
Yeah.
I'm already getting into this. And it's not just Ruby. They have like all the languages. That was the thing that made me realize like, oh, I don't know JavaScript at all yet.
At all. And there's like JavaScript is easily like the new girl on campus. It's like very popular and
Which I think the top 3 languages are JavaScript, Ruby, and Python. There's different lists that rank things in different ways, but I think that's pretty much how I studied. The hardcore version, if I had not moved to Chicago that week, the hardcore version was I was like, I should refactor all my old code from everything we've done in Ruby for the last 3 weeks.
We should be refactoring all of our code all of the time, Gabe.
I did not do that. So I think if you want to be a real DBC hero, Ruby warrior, and you have the time, like honest to God, I bet if you study that way, you're going to knock it out. And I wasn't going to talk about this, but I think I will now just because it makes sense. It's like, why should we listen to how Gabe studied? So they said the assessment is 3 hours long, and it should take the full 3 hours. And even if you don't finish, you can still pass the assessment. I met the entire requirements of the assessment within 1 hour. I had completed everything.
Yep.
And then I spent an extra 30 minutes because at the end we can't talk about it. Okay.
Yeah.
I almost slipped up there. Like at the end, I spent more time on this. Yeah. I spent an extra 30 minutes spending extra time on things you can spend extra time on.
Just cleaning, general maintenance.
Yeah. And, but every single thing on that thing, I was like, I know how to do this. I know how to do that. And I was like, I had to look up some things, like just to be sure I had the syntax right. But I think honestly, Code Wars, I think had a lot to do with it because I was doing that like the last 4 days. Every time I go to bed, I do a couple challenges, and every time I wake up in the morning, I do a couple challenges. And they were asking me to do things I'd never done before. But anyway, yeah. So how did you prepare for the big assessment? Discussing anything on it
for the assessment on Ruby, I guess pretty much backing up everything you said in that regard. The key point here is I refer to your old work, guys. A lot of stuff that you've typed, if you know it works, you don't need to like reinvent the wheel if you've already invented it. I really,
and that's like just challenges in general. I think like
100%.
I'm constantly looking at my old challenges when I'm working on new ones. I'm like, how the heck did I write that?
So no, you definitely like get your old stuff out there. I found I used like 3 of my previous documents during my programming experience at DBC for my final assessment, just to be like, how do I do this? Oh, well, I definitely did this as a problem last week. So I'm just going to apply it to this. To Gabe's point of like, you will, if you do end up finishing early, take the extra time to just like read it out loud. And this is really funny. I usually stand up in front of my computer and I
recite it.
I recite it like a monologue or a sonnet. And if something sounds screwy, then I'm like, okay, one sec, how can I make this less screwy?
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt here, but that, like reading your code out loud, I've noticed that's something that I do, and not everyone I've worked with has done it, but I think it helps if you can, how do I say this? When I have a bug in the coding and I can't figure out what it is, I will start reading every line of the code, but like I'll read the logic of it.
Yeah.
Like kind of like, like define and then method. These are the arguments and this type of data type. It's like with this, or these are the parameters. With these arguments, do this, this, and this. And like, I think if you read the code like, well, it is a language. I was going to say, but if you read it like a real life language, it'll help you better understand. Like, it's important to be able to do that.
A good
rather than just like muddling through the water, like trying to figure out.
Try to find an opportunity to like show your code off to strangers. A good format to go off of is that if you can like throw this at someone who has not even touched computer programming, and if they can kind of get the gist of it, just based, especially like, and we're talking Ruby here. I mean, don't throw JavaScript at a stranger and be like, "Cool, what do you think of it?" But
like know a little bit before you
like Ruby and Python
put it to work at least.
they're such like a type-based, object-oriented, like really translatable language where if you do like throw it at someone who hasn't really experienced it, and if they can kind of like get the gist of what it does by reading it out loud, then you're on the right track.
That's really interesting. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah. My girlfriend was a fantastic guinea pig for all of these, and I was throwing her things on the command line, like, type this out, and she'd be like, okay. And what would be very funny about the mindset, and I think a lot of programmers are going to like face this going into the industry, is I would make something, and I'd be like, this is great. This does this, it does that. And then she would take the computer and she would type something completely different. And then it turned into an effect of, I was looking at my programming by saying, cool, this can do that as long as, and that's something you want to avoid in a lot of your kind of frameworks and your projects in general. Because if you're saying like for methods, for example, like and actually we'll skip that for general thoughts because this is going into like object-oriented design.
This is getting really code heavy.
But long story short,
it's not a program about coding. This is a lifestyle channel.
But it's for the assessment. Just to wrap that up, I definitely used a lot of my previous work in DBC. I relied on strangers to kind of test it out and run it and see how it kind of like outputted. And finally, like Gabe did, I spent all the extra time, if I did have any, just refactoring and cleaning and making sure that it all read like in proper plain English terms. And for Ruby, you definitely want to strive for that. Make it digestible.
Yeah, and I think it's funny, like good coding in a lot of ways is like good writing, where I really like the book, The Elements of Style. I have it. I'm at my parents' like packing some stuff to bring back with me to Chicago, where I moved a couple weeks ago. But the Elements of Style, like succinctness is such a huge thing. Like don't use any unnecessary words. And great code, like it's not that it should always be in one line. Like there are other rules, like one piece of programming does one thing. Like that's really good for building on it later, but don't have redundancy. And it's and yeah, man, that's why Code Wars is so freaking great. Like it
yeah, I need to jump into that because it just sounds like it really fine-tuned.
And it's fun. It's a lot of fun. And I think there is a DevBootcamp clan on there. Like there's different like tribes or clans or whatever they call them. And so like I've been fighting my way up where I'm like, okay, I'm going to climb one rank like every day or every week. Awesome. So I think I'm in the top 10 now, just because other people haven't done as much as they could there.
Yeah.
That sounds impressive. That probably means like I've solved between 10 and 20 puzzles, which is not like.
Hey, that's 10 and 20 really more than I've done. So kudos, Ben.
Sure.
That's awesome.
All right. One more thing with the studying for the assessments. I forgot about this. Our advisors were really great, and they did a couple of breakout sessions, they called them, where they solved like challenges that were not, they were really involved, I guess, like, and they had like 10 things they had to do. And I watched both videos they put up. I probably would not have watched 3, but I did watch 2 of them, and it was different people doing it each time. So there's a couple little things I learned from each video, even if like a lot of the content overlapped. There's like a couple unique things to each video I picked up on. One of them was huge. It had to do with the logic of Ruby. We can go a little code heavy. It has to do if you have a OR statement with like the pipes. I don't know if there's an official name for those. If you have an OR statement with the pipes, when the left part of the statement is true, it doesn't even evaluate the right side. So you won't get an error in Ruby. Like he did that. He exploited that part of the logic to write something in his code. One of the advisors did, where normally you would get an error message from Ruby because it'd be like, this variable doesn't exist, or it's something like that. But as long as this one part of the statement is true, like it would always be true if the other conditions weren't being met. kind of thing.
Okay. So it seems like in general, the breakout sessions were really wonderful because one, you get exposure to code, which is always great.
And you can ask them questions while it's going on.
Yeah, and that's really cool. Live, so you get live interaction and live kind of back and forth. And even better, you kind of get to see how someone in the industry thinks. And once again, like philosophy here, like it doesn't matter like what kind of languages you know. Is what really matters, what's important to the market and your career is how you solve these problems.